In a kingdom far away, under the warm sun and surrounded by vast green forests, there lived a princess named Snow White. She was the daughter of a kind and noble king who ruled the land with fairness. Snow White was known throughout the kingdom for her extraordinary beauty, which was as pure as the snow that covered the ground in winter. Her skin was as white as freshly fallen snow, her lips as red as the ripest apple, and her hair was as dark as the night sky. But what made her truly special wasn't just her beauty, it was her kindness and warm heart. She would always help others and share her love with everyone she met, making her beloved by all who knew her. Unfortunately, Snow White's life was not without sorrow. Her mother, the queen, passed away when she was very young. The king, though deeply saddened by his wife's death, eventually remarried. His new queen, however, was not as kind or loving as Snow White's late mother. The new queen, known as the Evil Queen, was obsessed with her own beauty. Every day, she would stand in front of her magic mirror and ask the same question. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day, the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest in the land." This pleased the Evil Queen, and she was happy. However, as time passed, Snow White grew older, and her beauty began to shine brighter. One day, as the queen asked her usual question, the mirror gave an unexpected response. "You, my queen, are beautiful, but Snow White is the fairest of them all." The queen was horrified. Snow White, her stepdaughter, was more beautiful than her. The queen's jealousy and hatred for Snow White grew so strong that she couldn't bear to let anyone outshine her. Consumed with rage, she decided she had to get rid of Snow White, no matter the cost. The Evil Queen called for her huntsman, a man she trusted to carry out the most dreadful tasks. She ordered him to take Snow White into the forest and to never bring her back. The huntsman was loyal to the queen, but was also kind-hearted. He couldn't bring himself to harm the innocent princess. Instead, he took Snow White deep into the forest, and when he couldn't bear to hurt her, he let her go. "Run away, Snow White," he said, "and never return. If you stay here, the queen will find a way to destroy you." Snow White, frightened and confused, ran as fast as she could, not knowing where she was going but understanding that her life was in danger. Snow White wandered deeper into the forest, her heart heavy with fear. The trees around her seemed to close in, and the sounds of birds and animals filled the air. She had no idea where she was, and she was completely alone. After what seemed like hours of walking, Snow White came across a small, cozy cottage nestled among the trees. The cottage looked like a safe place, so Snow White knocked on the door. To her surprise, the door creaked open, and inside were 7 friendly dwarfs. They had been working in the forest, digging for gems and precious stones, and were kind enough to offer Snow White shelter. The dwarfs listened to Snow White's story and promised to protect her from the Evil Queen. They told her that as long as she stayed with them, she would be safe. Snow White thanked them for their kindness and decided to make their cottage her new home. From that day on, she lived happily with the dwarfs. They would work during the day, and Snow White would help them by cleaning the house, cooking meals, and keeping everything in order. She had finally found a place where she felt safe, surrounded by people who cared for her. But the Evil Queen was not one to give up so easily. She was still determined to be the fairest in the land, and when she learned from her magic mirror that Snow White was still alive, she was furious. The queen knew that Snow White had escaped to the forest, but she didn't know where she was. The queen devised a cunning plan to destroy Snow White once and for all. She disguised herself as an old, frail woman who sold apples. The queen knew that Snow White, being so kind and trusting, would not suspect her in this form. One day, the Evil Queen traveled to the cottage, carrying a basket filled with red, shiny apples. She knocked on the door, and when Snow White opened it, she was greeted by the sight of the old woman. The queen offered Snow White a beautiful, tempting apple, claiming it would make her feel better. "Take a bite, my dear, and you'll feel so much better," the old woman said in a sweet, raspy voice. Snow White, unaware of the danger, took the apple from the woman and took a bite. As soon as Snow White bit into the apple, she fell to the ground in a deep, enchanted sleep. The evil queen had cursed the apple, and with that single bite, Snow White was trapped in a slumber so deep that no one could wake her. The queen, pleased with her evil deed, returned to the palace, confident that Snow White would never again be a threat to her. The dwarfs, returning to the cottage that evening, found Snow White lying unconscious on the floor. They were heartbroken and confused, knowing something terrible had happened. The dwarfs placed Snow White in a glass coffin, hoping that one day someone would come to break the curse. They couldn't bear to bury her, as they still loved her dearly. The glass coffin was placed in a quiet corner of the forest, surrounded by flowers, where the dwarfs could keep watch. They believed that one day, a miracle might happen, and Snow White could be saved. For many months, Snow White remained in her deep sleep, her beauty undiminished. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. One day, a young prince who had heard of Snow White's beauty and kindness came to the forest. He had fallen in love with her from afar, and when he arrived at the cottage and saw her lying in the glass coffin, he was overcome with emotion. He knew that he had to do something to break the curse. Snow White was not just a beautiful princess to him, she was the love of his life. He leaned down and kissed her, hoping with all his heart that his love would be powerful enough to wake her. As soon as the prince kisses Snow White, something miraculous happened. Snow White's eyes fluttered open, and she woke from her deep sleep. The curse had been broken. Snow White looked up at the prince and smiled, and for the first time in many months, the world seemed bright again. Snow White was free. The dwarfs, who had been waiting anxiously, saw the miracle unfold before their eyes. They cheered and celebrated, their hearts filled with joy. Snow White thanked the prince for saving her, and together, they shared the happiness of the moment. The prince told Snow White that he had always known she was special, and he had fallen in love with her because of her kindness and bravery. Snow White, overjoyed, realized that she had found not only her true love, but also a friend who would always be there for her. The prince and Snow White were married in a grand ceremony. The whole kingdom rejoiced as the two were united, and the kingdom was filled with happiness once again. But the evil queen, who had been watching from afar, was enraged. She had believed that Snow White was gone for good, but now she learned that the princess was alive and well. The queen, furious beyond measure, went to the palace to confront Snow White. The queen, once powerful and beautiful, was now filled with hatred and rage. She demanded to know how Snow White had escaped her curse. Snow White, standing tall beside her prince, faced the evil queen with courage. The queen tried to use her dark magic against them, but it was too late. The magic that had once ruled over the kingdom was now broken. Snow White's kindness and the prince's love had triumphed over the queen's wickedness. The evil queen's magic faded, and her power was gone. She was no longer a threat to Snow White or anyone in the kingdom. With her defeat, peace returned to the land. Snow White and the prince ruled the kingdom with kindness and fairness, bringing prosperity and joy to everyone they met. And so, they lived happily ever after, surrounded by love and happiness, knowing that the greatest magic of all was the magic of love, goodness, and the strength to face evil with bravery and kindness.